My wife said, I need a break to figure myself out, no contact. Then her mom tagged her in family vacation photos with her high school lover. I respected her journey, shipped all her belongings to her parents' address, and changed my relationship status to single when she finally called, ready to talk. You know that feeling when you're cruising along thinking life's got your back, and then boom, reality sucker punches you right in the gut? Yeah, well, welcome to my Tuesday night from hell. I'm sitting there on our beat-up couch, the one Clara always complained about but I secretly loved because it had that perfect dent where my ass fit just right after 4 years of Netflix binges, when she walks into the living room with this look on her face. Not the, honey, can you take out the trash look, or even the you left dishes in the sink again look. No, this was something else entirely. This was the kind of look that makes your stomach drop faster than a lead balloon. Clara's standing there in her favorite oversized sweater, the burgundy one I bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, and she's got this weird energy about her. Like she's rehearsed whatever's about to come out of her mouth 100 times in the bathroom mirror. Her hands are doing that fidgety thing where she picks at her cuticles, which should have been my first red flag, but honestly, I was too busy wondering if she was about to tell me she accidentally backed into Mrs. Henderson's mailbox again. Marcus, she says, and there's this tremble in her voice that sounds faker than a $3 bill. We need to talk. Oh, fantastic. Because nothing good has ever started with those 4 words in the history of human relationships. I mute the TV. We were watching some cooking show where Gordon Ramsay was tearing apart some poor chef's risotto, and turned to face her fully. That's when I see them. The tears. Except they're not real tears, you know? They're the kind of tears you force out when you're trying to sell someone a sob story. I've seen Clara cry for real, when her grandma died, when she got that rejection letter from the art gallery, when we watched Marley and Me for the 3rd time. This wasn't that. I need a break, she continues, and I swear to God, it's like she's reading from a script. I need to figure myself out. No contact. No contact. Those 2 words hit me like a freight train carrying a load of pure confusion and disbelief. I'm sitting there trying to process what she just said while she's standing in front of me wringing her hands like Lady Macbeth. For years of marriage, 6 years together total, and she needs to figure herself out. What the hell was there to figure out? We weren't exactly living some complicated existence here. We had our routine, work, dinner, TV, occasional weekend trips to her parents' place. The usual married couple stuff that might be boring to some people, but felt pretty damn comfortable to me. But here's the kicker. She moves toward me for a hug. A hug. Like we're old buddies saying goodbye after a casual dinner, instead of a wife telling her husband she's basically pressing the pause button on their entire life together. The hug feels wrong from the second her arms go around me. It's stiff and awkward, like she's hugging a distant relative at a funeral. There's no warmth, no genuine emotion. Just this mechanical gesture that feels more obligatory than heartfelt. I don't fight it. Maybe I should have, but something in my gut told me this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was planned, calculated, and probably inevitable. Maybe I'm too much of a decent guy, or maybe I'm just a sucker, but I actually believed her. I thought, okay, she's going through something. People need space sometimes. I can respect that. So I watch her pack a small overnight bag. Just the essentials, she says. Toothbrush, couple changes of clothes, her phone charger, that little stuffed elephant she's had since college. It takes her maybe 15 minutes, and the whole time I'm standing there like an idiot thinking this is temporary. She's coming back. She just needs a few days to clear her head. I'm going to stay with Naomi, she tells me, zipping up her bag. Naomi, her older sister who lives across town in one of those trendy converted loft apartments and works as a yoga instructor. Naomi, who's never been married and has always had this subtle way of making me feel like I wasn't quite good enough for her precious little sister. Perfect choice for relationship advice, I'm sure. And then she's gone. Just like that. The front door closes behind her with this soft click that might as well have been a gunshot for how final it sounded. I'm left standing in our living room. My living room now, I guess, staring at the space where she'd been standing just moments before. The first week was absolute torture. You know those movies where the guy gets dumped and he's all depressed, lying around in his underwear eating cereal straight from the box, while sad music plays in the background? Yeah, that was me, except it was worse because this wasn't a breakup. This was limbo. This was being told to wait around while your wife figures herself out. Whatever the hell that means. I couldn't eat anything that didn't taste like cardboard. Sleep? Forget about it. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every little sound in the apartment, half expecting to hear her key in the door. The bed felt enormous and cold, like sleeping on a glacier. Even our cat, Mr. Whiskers, seemed confused, wandering around the apartment looking for Clara and giving me these accusatory looks like it was somehow my fault she was gone. Thank God for Andre. My best friend since college showed up at my door on day 3 of my pathetic spiral, took one look at me, and basically dragged me out of the apartment by my shirt collar. "Dude, you look like hell warmed over," he said, which was probably being generous. "We're going to the gym. You're going to sweat out whatever this is, and then we're going to grab some real food." Andre's one of those guys who thinks every problem in life can be solved with enough bench presses and protein shakes. Usually, I find his gym bro philosophy annoying, but right then, I needed someone to tell me what to do because my brain had apparently gone on vacation along with my wife. The gym helped, sort of. Hard to feel sorry for yourself when you're struggling not to drop a barbell on your chest. Plus, the physical exhaustion made it easier to sleep, even if it was that restless kind of sleep where you're never quite sure if you're awake or dreaming. Work was another story. Leo, my co-worker and cubicle neighbor, kept giving me these sympathetic looks and dropping these little nuggets of wisdom like, "You gotta respect her journey, man, and sometimes people need space to grow." Easy for him to say. His wife's idea of needing space is going to Target alone for 2 hours on Saturday afternoon. But here's the thing that was eating at me the whole time. Something felt off about the whole situation. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, call it whatever you want. But there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I was missing something important. The timing felt weird. The way she delivered her little speech felt rehearsed, and the fact that she demanded absolutely no contact seemed extreme for someone who supposedly just needed to find herself. Still, I respected her wishes. No texts, no calls, no drive-bys past Naomi's apartment. Okay, maybe one drive-by, but I didn't stop or anything. I was being the understanding husband, giving her the space she asked for, trusting that she'd come back when she was ready. Looking back now, I realize I was being played like a fiddle by a master manipulator. But at the time, I was just a guy trying to do the right thing, holding on a hope that the woman I'd promised to love through sickness and health was going through some kind of quarter-life crisis and would come to her senses. Boy, was I in for a rude awakening. 10 days. 10 whole days of me being the model estranged husband, respecting boundaries like some kind of relationship saint while slowly losing my mind in an apartment that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. 10 days of Andre force-feeding me protein bars and dragging me through workouts that left me too exhausted to think. 10 days of Leo's unsolicited wisdom about personal growth journeys and giving people space to evolve. 10 days of me actually believing that my wife was out there somewhere, sitting in lotus position on Naomi's overpriced meditation cushions, having some kind of spiritual awakening that would eventually lead her back to our boring but comfortable life together. What a goddamn idiot I was. It was a Saturday morning, and I was doing what any pathetic, recently separated guy does on the weekend. Lying in bed scrolling through social media like it was my job. I'd already exhausted Facebook, nothing but political rants and baby photos. Checked Twitter, more political rants and people arguing about whether cereal is soup, and was half-heartedly browsing Instagram when I saw it. Sylvia Mendez had posted a new photo. Now, let me tell you about Clara's mom, Sylvia. This woman treats social media like her personal broadcasting network. She documents everything, and I mean everything, from her morning coffee to her evening glass of wine. She's one of those people who posts pictures of her lunch with captions like, "Blessed to have this amazing salad. Hashtag grateful, hashtag healthy living, hashtag living my best life." Usually, I just scroll past her posts because, honestly, nobody needs to see that many photos of someone's garden or their cat wearing tiny hats. But this post stopped me cold. It was a carousel of photos from what looked like a family beach vacation. The caption read, "Amazing family getaway. So blessed to have everyone together. Hashtag family time, hashtag beach life, hashtag making memories." Innocent enough, right? Wrong. Dead fucking wrong. I swiped to the second photo and felt my stomach drop into my shoes. There was Clara, my supposedly soul-searching, space-needing, self-discovering wife, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. She was wearing this cute little sundress I'd never seen before, a bright yellow number that made her look like a goddamn ray of sunshine. Her hair was down and wavy from the ocean breeze, and she had that relaxed, carefree expression that I hadn't seen on her face in months. She looked happy, really, genuinely happy. Not the forced, rehearsed happiness she'd been giving me lately, but the real deal. But wait, it gets better. Because standing right next to her, with his arm casually draped around her shoulders like it belonged there, was Julian fucking Carrera. Julian, the high school boyfriend she'd told me was ancient history. The guy she described as just a silly teenage fling when his name came up in conversation. The same Julian who apparently lived in Miami now and worked in some kind of tech startup, according to the social media deep dive I'd done when Clara and I first started dating. Don't judge me. We all stalk our partner's exes. The Julian who was supposedly so far in her rearview mirror that he might as well have been a fictional character. Except here he was, very real and very much in the present, looking like he'd just stepped off the cover of Men's Health magazine. The bastard had apparently aged like fine wine. Still had that dark hair and those annoyingly perfect teeth, but now he'd filled out in all the right places. He was wearing board shorts and a tank top that showed off the kind of tan you only get from actually living somewhere sunny, not from weekend trips to the community pool. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds, trying to process what I was seeing. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe Julian just happened to be at the same beach. Maybe this was some kind of cosmic joke where all of Clara's family and her ex-boyfriend coincidentally ended up at the same vacation spot at the same time. Then I swiped to the next photo. Holy shit. This one was taken at what looked like a family dinner. Everyone was crowded around a table at some beachside restaurant. Sylvia, her husband Roberto, Naomi, a few other family members I recognized from various holidays and birthday parties over the years. And there, sitting practically in Julian's lap, like she was his goddamn girlfriend, was my wife. She wasn't just sitting next to him. She was leaning into him, her hand resting on his chest, looking up at him with this expression that made me want to throw my phone across the room. It was the same look she used to give me when we first started dating, back when everything was new and exciting and full of possibility. The worst part? Julian was looking right back at her with that same energy, like they were sharing some private joke that nobody else at the table was in on. Like they were the only two people in the world who mattered. I scrolled back up to check the location tag. Clearwater Beach, Florida. Posted 2 hours ago. Which meant that while I'd been sitting in our apartment eating cereal straight from the box and wondering if I should text her, but not texting her because I was respecting her fucking boundaries, she'd been living it up in Florida with her family and her ex-boyfriend. But the real kicker, the detail that made me want to punch a hole through my bedroom wall, was that Sylvia had tagged him. Julian Carrera, right there in the post for everyone to see. She hadn't just included him in the family vacation photos. She'd made him an official part of the narrative. I went back through all the photos again, looking for any sign that this was innocent. Maybe Julian was dating Naomi now? Nope. There was a photo of Naomi with some other guy who looked like he belonged in a CrossFit commercial. Maybe Julian was just a family friend who happened to be in town? The way Clara was draped all over him suggested otherwise. My hands were shaking as I screenshot every single photo. I don't know why, some kind of instinct for self-preservation, maybe. Evidence of what? I wasn't sure yet. But something in my gut told me I was going to need proof of this moment, this feeling, this absolute betrayal disguised as self-discovery. 10 days. She'd asked for a break to figure herself out 10 days ago, and she was already posting couple photos with her ex-boyfriend. The math was pretty fucking simple, even for a guy who'd apparently been living in denial for the past week and a half. This wasn't Clara having some kind of spiritual awakening or quarter-life crisis. This was Clara testing the waters with Julian while keeping me on the back burner as her safety net. This was her having her cake and eating it too, except the cake was two different men, and she was hoping neither of us would figure out what she was really up to. I sat there in my empty apartment, staring at these photos of my wife looking happier than she'd been in months, and felt something inside me shift. The hurt was still there. God, it felt like someone had reached into my chest and twisted my heart like a dish rag. But underneath the pain, something else was growing. Something colder and more calculating. Anger? Sure, but not the hot, explosive kind that makes you do stupid things. This was different. This was the kind of anger that clears your head and sharpens your focus. Clara wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd just made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. You know what's funny about betrayal? Most people think it turns you into some kind of raging lunatic, throwing dishes and screaming at the walls like you're auditioning for a reality TV show. But that's not what happened to me. Instead of losing my shit, I got methodical. I got precise. I got scary fucking organized. The morning after my little Instagram revelation, I woke up with this strange sense of clarity. No more moping around in my underwear, eating stale cereal. No more lying in bed staring at the ceiling wondering what I did wrong. Clara had made her choice, and now I was going to make mine. I started with coffee. Real coffee, not that instant crap I'd been surviving on. I ground the beans, used the French press, even heated up some milk the way Clara always liked it before I remembered she wasn't here to drink it. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, a legal pad, and a pen, and I made a plan. Step 1. Get all of Clara's shit out of my apartment. See, here's the thing about Clara. She was a pack rat disguised as a minimalist. In our bedroom, she had maybe 15 items of clothing and acted all superior about her capsule wardrobe. But the spare bedroom? That was a different story entirely. That room was like a museum of Clara's entire existence, crammed with enough stuff to stock a small boutique. I opened the spare room door and just stood there for a minute, taking inventory. The closet was bursting with clothes she might wear someday. Vintage band t-shirts from concerts she'd never been to, designer jeans with the tags still on them. Enough coats to survive an Arctic winter despite the fact that we lived in a place where it rarely dropped below 50 degrees. There were plastic storage bins full of art supplies she'd bought during various creative phases that lasted about as long as a Netflix free trial. Boxes of college textbooks she swore she'd reference someday, even though her psych degree had exactly zero relevance to her current job managing social media for a local restaurant chain. And then there were the sentimental items. Oh boy, the sentimental items. Clara kept everything that had even the slightest emotional significance. Ticket stubs from our first movie date, napkins from restaurants we'd been to, that stupid stuffed penguin she'd won at a carnival on our second anniversary, her grandmother's jewelry box, photo albums from high school, a shoebox full of handwritten letters from friends she hadn't talked to in years. Normally, going through all this stuff would have sent me into some kind of nostalgic spiral. I'd have spent hours looking at old photos and remembering better times, probably ending up in tears on the floor, surrounded by memories. But something had shifted in my brain overnight. Looking at all of Clara's belongings, I didn't feel sadness or longing. I felt nothing. It was just stuff. Stuff that belonged to someone who was currently in Florida posting couple photos with her ex-boyfriend while I played the role of the faithful husband waiting patiently for her return. Fuck that noise. I went to the storage unit in our building's basement and grabbed every empty box I could find. Then I hit up the office supply store and bought bubble wrap, packing tape, labels, and markers. The lady at the checkout gave me a sympathetic look, probably thinking I was moving or something. If only she knew. I started with the clothes. Every single item folded neatly and placed carefully in boxes, just like Clara would have done it herself. I'm not a monster. I wasn't going to wrinkle her precious vintage band tees or crumple up those designer jeans she'd never worn. But I also wasn't going to spend the next 6 months looking at reminders of her scattered all over my apartment. The art supplies went next. Watercolor sets still in their plastic packaging, sketchbooks with maybe 3 pages used, enough colored pencils to supply a small elementary school. Clara had always been one of those people who thought buying the equipment would somehow make her more artistic. Spoiler alert, it didn't work that way. Then came the really personal stuff, and this is where my newfound organizational skills really shone. Her grandmother's jewelry, including that antique brooch she'd inherited and only wore on special occasions, got wrapped in tissue paper, then bubble wrap, then placed in a small box with enough padding to survive a nuclear apocalypse. The photo albums got plastic bags before going into boxes, because God forbid they get damaged and Clara couldn't reminisce about her glory days anymore. But here's the thing that really shows you what kind of petty genius I'd become overnight. I documented everything. Every single box got a detailed inventory list, typed up and printed out. Box number 1, winter coats, sweaters, dressy blouses. Box number 2, casual wear, workout clothes, pajamas. Box number 3, art supplies, sketchbooks, that ceramic planter she claimed I'd broken out of spite. Spoiler. It was wrapped in 10 layers of bubble wrap and perfectly intact. I took photos of everything before it went into the boxes. I took photos of the boxes after they were packed and labeled. I created a spreadsheet with box numbers, contents, approximate value, and condition notes. If Clara wanted to accuse me of stealing or damaging her precious belongings, she was going to have to contend with more documentation than a government audit. The whole process took 3 days. 3 methodical, therapeutic days of systematically removing every trace of Clara from my living space. And you know what? It felt fucking amazing. Each box I packed was like lifting a weight off my shoulders. Each item I wrapped and labeled was me taking control of a situation that had been controlling me. By the time I was finished, I had 12 boxes total. 12 boxes containing 4 years of Clara's accumulated stuff, all neatly organized and ready for shipping. The spare room looked like a different place entirely. Clean, empty, full of potential instead of reminders of someone who'd rather be posting Instagram photos with her ex than working on her marriage. I called a courier service and got a quote for shipping 12 boxes across town with full insurance coverage. $310. Normally, that would have seemed like a lot of money to spend on shipping stuff 15 miles. But right then, it felt like the bargain of the century. $310 to completely remove Clara from my physical space and send a message that I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to finish her little vacation romance. Sold. The courier showed up the next morning, a guy named Mike who looked like he could bench press a small car. He took one look at my 12 perfectly labeled and documented boxes and whistled appreciatively. Damn, man, you pack better than most moving companies. Your wife's going to be impressed with how organized this is. Ex-wife. I corrected him, and it felt good to say. Really fucking good. Mike loaded everything into his truck with the kind of care you'd expect from someone handling insured packages. I handed him the delivery address, Sylvia and Roberto's house, and watched him drive away with 4 years of Clara's life neatly packed and labeled. That afternoon, I got the delivery confirmation. 12 boxes, delivered safely to the Mendez residence, signed for by one Sylvia Mendez at 2:47 p.m. Phase 1 was complete. Now for Phase 2. 3 weeks. 21 glorious days of silence, of living in an apartment that actually felt like mine again, of sleeping in a bed that didn't smell like Clara's vanilla body lotion and existential crisis. 21 days of hitting the gym with Andre, actually eating real food instead of sadness cereal, and slowly remembering what it felt like to be a human being instead of a discarded husband sitting on a shelf waiting to be picked up again. I was starting to think maybe Clara had gotten the message. Maybe seeing her 12 boxes of carefully packed belongings show up at Mommy and Daddy's house had been enough of a reality check to make her realize that actions have consequences. Maybe she was finally understanding that you can't just put your spouse in timeout while you go gallivanting around Florida with your high school boyfriend and expect everything to be waiting for you when you get back. Boy, was I wrong. It was a Thursday evening, and I was making actual dinner for the first time in weeks, not just heating up a frozen pizza or ordering takeout, but real cooking with vegetables and everything. I'd picked up this salmon fillet from the fancy grocery store, the kind of thing Clara always said was too expensive for a weeknight, and I was feeling pretty damn good about my newfound domestic independence when my phone started buzzing. Unknown number. Normally, I'd let that shit go to voicemail because nobody calls with good news from a block number. But something made me answer it. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was stupidity, maybe it was just the fact that I was feeling confident enough to handle whatever bullshit was about to come through that speaker. Hello, I said, using my most neutral voice. Marcus, it's me. And just like that, the bubble of peace I'd been living in for 3 weeks popped like a balloon at a kid's birthday party. Clara's voice hit me with this weird mix of familiarity and revulsion, like hearing your favorite song playing in a dentist's office while someone's drilling into your teeth. I'm ready to talk now, she continued, and I could hear that fake tremble in her voice again. The same manufactured vulnerability she'd used the night she walked out. I've done a lot of thinking, and I miss you. I miss us. I stood there in my kitchen, salmon sizzling in the pan behind me, and felt absolutely nothing. No racing heart. No surge of hope. No desperate relief that she'd finally called. Just this calm, cold certainty that whatever game she was trying to play, I wasn't interested in being a participant anymore. Clara, I said, my voice steady as a rock. There is no us to figure out. The silence on the other end stretched out long enough for me to flip the salmon and add some asparagus to the pan. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she processed what I'd just said. This clearly wasn't the response she'd been expecting. What do you mean there's no us? She sounded genuinely confused, like I'd just told her that gravity had stopped working. Marcus, it was just a break. I told you I needed time to figure myself out. I never said we were over. The audacity was breathtaking. Absolutely fucking breathtaking. This woman had spent the last 3 weeks posting vacation photos with her ex-boyfriend while I respected her wishes for no contact. And now she was acting like I was the one who'd misunderstood the situation. A break. I repeated, letting the words hang in the air for a moment. Is that what you call going to Florida with Julian? Another silence. This one was different though, not confused, but caught. Like a kid with chocolate on their face, trying to convince you they didn't eat the cookies. How did you? She started, then stopped herself. It wasn't like that, Marcus. Julian was just there. My mom invited him because he was in town visiting his family, and it would have been rude not to include him in our family vacation. The lies came so easily, so smoothly, that I almost had to admire the craftsmanship. If I hadn't seen those Instagram photos myself, if I didn't have screenshots of her practically sitting in Julian's lap at that restaurant, I might have actually bought this bullshit explanation. Just there, I said, seasoning my asparagus while she dug herself deeper into her hole of deception. That's interesting, because your mother's photos made it look pretty cozy for someone who was just there. Those photos were taken out of context, she said, and now I could hear the panic creeping into her voice. The careful script she'd prepared was falling apart, and she was scrambling to improvise. We're old friends, Marcus. Of course we were friendly. That doesn't mean anything happened. Old friends. Right. Old friends who cuddle up for family dinner photos and gaze into each other's eyes like they're auditioning for a Nicholas Sparks movie. Look, she continued, her voice shifting into that pleading tone she used when she wanted something. I know it looks bad, but you're reading too much into it. Julian and I are ancient history. You know that. I came home early from the vacation because I realized what I was doing was wrong. I realized I don't want to figure myself out. I want to figure us out. Together. Came home early. That was rich. She came home because Julian probably got tired of her drama and kicked her to the curb, leaving her with no choice but to crawl back to her safety net. Me. I've been thinking about you every day, she pressed on, really laying it on thick now. I made a mistake asking for a break. I should have talked to you about what I was feeling instead of running away. But I'm ready to work on us now. I'm ready to come home and be your wife again. Your wife again. Like it was a job she'd taken a sabbatical from and was now ready to resume. Like she could just clock back in after her little vacation and pick up where she left off. The entitlement was staggering. The sheer fucking audacity of this woman thinking she could put me on hold while she test drove her ex-boyfriend. Then waltz back into my life when things didn't work out with Plan A. Did she really think I was that pathetic? That desperate? That lacking in self-respect? Marcus, she said when I didn't respond immediately. Are you there? Talk to me, baby. Tell me what you're thinking. Baby. She called me baby like we were still a couple, like nothing had changed, like she hadn't spent the last 3 weeks posting Instagram photos that looked like engagement announcements with another man. I turned off the stove and plated my dinner. Perfectly cooked salmon, crisp asparagus, a side of rice that I'd actually bothered to season properly. It looked like something from a restaurant, the kind of meal Clara always claimed she was too tired to make after work. I'm thinking, I said slowly, deliberately, that you've got some brass balls calling me up and acting like you're doing me a favor by coming back. That's not, I didn't mean. I'm thinking that you wanted to have your cake and eat it too. Keep the boring, reliable husband on the back burner while you explored your options with the high school boyfriend. See if the grass was greener on the other side. Marcus, please, it wasn't like that. And I'm thinking that now that things didn't work out the way you planned, you're trying to crawl back to your safety net. Problem is, Clara, I'm not your fucking safety net anymore. The silence that followed was different from the others. This one was heavy with the weight of truth, with the realization that maybe, just maybe, she'd miscalculated. That maybe the reliable, patient husband she'd left behind had grown a spine while she was gone. Don't do this, she whispered, and for the first time since she'd called, her voice sounded genuinely small. Not manufactured, not rehearsed, but actually vulnerable. Please don't throw away everything we had over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That's what she was calling it now. 4 years of marriage reduced to a simple misunderstanding, like she'd accidentally grabbed the wrong coffee order at Starbucks. I took a bite of my salmon. It was perfect, flaky, seasoned just right, cooked exactly the way I liked it. The way Clara never bothered to learn despite 4 years of me telling her I preferred it medium instead of well done. There's nothing to throw away, Clara, I said, chewing slowly. You already took care of that when you decided to take your little sabbatical with Julian. And then I hung up on her. You know what they say about the apple not falling far from the tree? Well, I was about to get a masterclass in exactly where Clara learned her manipulation tactics, because apparently hanging up on her daughter was like poking a mama bear with a stick. I'd barely finished savoring that perfectly cooked salmon, and let me tell you, it tasted even better after delivering that verbal knockout punch, when my phone started ringing again. Same unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, figuring Clara was calling back to try some new angle, maybe throw in some crocodile tears or threaten to hurt herself if I didn't take her back. Standard playbook shit. But curiosity killed the cat, and apparently I was feeling feline that evening. What now, Clara? I answered, not bothering to hide my irritation. This isn't Clara. The voice that came through the speaker was older, sharper, and absolutely dripping with righteous indignation. This is her mother, and we need to talk. Ah, Sylvia, the architect of Clara's emotional manipulation blueprint, the woman who'd raised entitlement to an art form, and the same genius who'd posted those damning vacation photos for the whole world to see. This should be fun. Hello, Sylvia, I said, leaning back in my chair and settling in for what I knew was going to be an entertaining shit show. How can I help you? Help me. Her voice pitched higher, like she couldn't believe I had the audacity to sound calm. You can help me by explaining what the hell you think you're doing to my daughter. My daughter. Not Clara, or your wife, or even our daughter-in-law. But my daughter. Like Clara was still 12 years old, and I was some mean kid on the playground who'd pushed her off the swing set. I'm not doing anything to Clara, I replied, taking a sip of the beer I'd cracked open to go with dinner. I'm just not doing anything for her anymore, either. Don't get smart with me, young man. Young man. Jesus Christ, I was 32 years old and had been married to her daughter for 4 years, but apparently I was still young man in Sylvia's book. Clara is upstairs crying her eyes out because of your cruelty. Cruelty. That was rich coming from the woman whose family vacation photos had looked like a fucking engagement announcement between Clara and Julian. But I kept my voice level, because something told me this conversation was about to get a lot more interesting. What exactly am I being cruel about, Sylvia? Shipping her things like she's some kind of stranger. The indignation in her voice was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Changing your relationship status on social media like a petulant child. Blocking her on everything. How could you be so heartless? I had to give her credit for the dramatic flair. She made it sound like I'd burned Clara's belongings in the front yard and posted the video on TikTok instead of carefully packing everything with museum-quality care and paying for insured shipping. Clara asked for no contact. I said simply. I gave her exactly what she wanted. She asked for space to think, not for you to erase her from your life. Sylvia's voice was getting shriller by the second. A mature husband would have waited patiently for his wife to work through her feelings, not thrown a tantrum the moment things got difficult. A tantrum. Right. Because methodically packing someone's belongings and shipping them with a detailed inventory was definitely tantrum behavior. I was starting to see where Clara got her talent for rewriting reality to suit her narrative. Sylvia, I said, setting down my beer and leaning forward. Let me ask you something. When Clara asked for this space to think, did she mention that she'd be doing her thinking while cuddled up with Julian on a beach in Florida? The silence that followed was beautiful. Absolutely fucking beautiful. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she realized that I knew about their little family vacation, that all her righteous indignation was built on a foundation of lies that I could demolish with a single sentence. That's different, she finally sputtered. Julian is an old family friend. We've known him since high school. It would have been rude not to invite him when he was visiting his parents. Old family friend. Same script Clara had used, word for word. I was starting to wonder if they'd rehearsed this whole thing together, Maybe held a little strategy session over coffee and croissants while planning how to gaslight me into submission. An old family friend, I repeated. Is that what you call someone your daughter's sitting on like a throne in your family dinner photos? Another pause. This one was longer, more dangerous. When Sylvia spoke again, her voice had shifted from shrill indignation to something colder, more calculated. You're twisting innocent moments into something sinister, she said. Clara and Julian have always been affectionate friends. That's just their dynamic. The fact that you're reading something sexual into normal friendship says more about your own insecurities than it does about their behavior. Holy shit. This woman was actually trying to make me feel crazy for seeing what was right there in front of my face. Gaslighting 101, straight from the master herself. I was starting to understand how Clara had gotten so good at this. She'd learned from a fucking professional. Normal friendship, I said, pulling up the screenshots I'd saved on my phone. Tell me, Sylvia, in your normal friendships, do you usually sit in your friends' laps at family dinners? Do you usually gaze into their eyes like you're about to start making out right there at the table? You're being ridiculous. Because I've got to say, if that's normal friendship behavior, I've been doing friendship completely wrong my whole life. Stop it. The mask was slipping now. The concerned mother act was cracking, revealing something uglier underneath. You're being deliberately cruel, twisting everything to make Clara look bad when she was ready to come home and work things out with you. Come home and work things out. Like she was doing me some kind of favor. Like I should be grateful that she was willing to settle for boring old me after her vacation romance didn't work out the way she'd planned. Here's the thing, Sylvia, I said, standing up and walking to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of those Florida beach photos. Clara didn't want to work things out. She wanted to have her cake and eat it too. She wanted to keep me on ice while she figured out if Julian was a better option. That's not. She wanted me to sit here like a good little husband, respecting her boundaries and giving her space while she posted Instagram photos that looked like honeymoon pictures with another man. You're being paranoid. And now that things didn't work out with Plan A, she wants to activate Plan B. Problem is, I'm not interested in being anybody's backup plan. The silence stretched out again, but this time it felt different. Less shocked, more calculating. When Sylvia spoke again, her voice was ice cold. Clara told me you'd gotten bitter, she said. She said you'd changed, become vindictive and small. I didn't want to believe it, but I can hear it in your voice now. This isn't the man she married. And there it was. The guilt trip, the attempt to make me feel like I was the problem, like my refusal to be a doormat was somehow a character flaw that needed correcting. You're right, I said, surprising her. This isn't the man Clara married. The man Clara married would have sat here for months, maybe years, waiting for her to decide whether she wanted him or not. The man Clara married would have been grateful just to be considered. I paused, letting that sink in. But that man was an idiot, Sylvia. And idiots learn, eventually. The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a growl of frustration. She was ready to give you another chance, she said, playing what she thought was her trump card. Despite everything, despite how you've treated her, she was willing to come back and try again. Another chance. Give me another chance. Like I was some kind of charity case who should be thankful for whatever scraps of affection Clara was willing to throw my way. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The whole situation was so fucking absurd that laughter was the only sane response. What's so funny? Sylvia demanded. You are, I said, wiping my eyes. Both of you. You actually think Clara's the victim here. You actually think I should be grateful that she's willing to give me another chance after spending 3 weeks playing house with her ex-boyfriend. It wasn't like that. The entitlement is breathtaking, Sylvia. Absolutely breathtaking. Your daughter cheats on me emotionally, if not physically, then has the balls to act like she's doing me a favor by coming back when things don't work out with Julian. And you're enabling it. How dare you? Tell Clara I said thanks for the offer, but I'm good. And tell her to stop calling from different numbers. I've got better things to do with my time. If you hang up on me. But I'd already ended the call. And this time, I turned off my phone completely. Fuck them both. A week of absolute radio silence followed my phone conversation with the Mendez women, and it was fucking glorious. No unknown numbers lighting up my screen, no desperate voicemails from Clara trying different emotional manipulation tactics, no Sylvia calling to lecture me about what a real man would do in this situation. Just peace, quiet, and the sound of my own life finally getting back on track. I'd established a routine that didn't revolve around wondering when Clara might come home or what mood she'd be in when she did. Wake up at 7, hit the gym with Andre before work, come home to an apartment that stayed exactly the way I left it, cook actual meals instead of surviving on takeout and sadness, and go to bed in a king-size bed that was all mine. It was like being single again, except better, because I'd learned how to take care of myself properly instead of just existing in a state of bachelor squalor. Which is probably why I was completely unprepared for what I found when I came home from work that Thursday evening. I'd had a decent day at the office. Closed a big account, got praise from my boss, even managed to make Leo laugh so hard at lunch that he snorted Diet Coke out of his nose. I was feeling pretty good about life as I climbed the stairs to my second-floor apartment, keys in hand, already mentally planning what I was going to cook for dinner. Maybe that chicken piccata recipe I'd bookmarked, or just something simple like pasta with the good marinara sauce I'd splurged on last weekend. Then I turned the corner and stopped dead in my tracks. Clara was sitting on my steps. Not just sitting. She was positioned, like she'd carefully chosen the exact spot that would give her the most dramatic impact when I arrived. She was wearing this soft gray sweater that I used to love on her, the one that made her eyes look bigger and more vulnerable, and her dark hair was down in loose waves that caught the hallway light just right. She'd clearly put thought into this ambush, right down to the positioning of her hands clasped in her lap, like some kind of tragic Victorian heroine waiting for her lover to return from war. But that wasn't even the best part. Standing behind her like a bodyguard at a celebrity event was Sylvia, arms crossed, wearing an expression that suggested she was ready to throw down right there in the stairwell, if necessary. She'd traded her usual yoga mom uniform for what I can only describe as battle gear. Black slacks, a crisp white blouse, and the kind of blazer that screams, "I want to speak to your manager." "Marcus," Clara said as soon as she saw me, and her voice had that trembling, about-to-cry quality that used to make me want to fix whatever was wrong. Now it just made me tired. "We need to talk. Face to face." We. Like this was some kind of diplomatic negotiation, and Sylvia was her translator. I looked at them for a long moment. These two women who'd apparently decided that ambushing me at my own home was a reasonable next step in their campaign to get me back in line. Part of me was impressed by the audacity. It took real balls to show up unannounced at someone's apartment after they'd explicitly told you to fuck off. But mostly I was just annoyed that my peaceful evening was about to get derailed by whatever fresh bullshit they'd cooked up. "Clara," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "What are you doing here?" "I tried calling, but you blocked my number," she said, and now the tears were starting. "Right on schedule. I tried texting, but those are blocked too. This was the only way I could reach you. The only way she could reach me. Like I'd accidentally blocked her instead of doing it very deliberately after she'd spent 3 weeks posting vacation photos with her ex-boyfriend. Like my desire not to be contacted was some kind of technical malfunction she needed to work around. "I blocked you for a reason," I said, not moving from where I stood. "The same reason I shipped your stuff to your parents' house." "We're done, Clara." "No, we're not." The tears were flowing freely now, and she stood up from the steps with this dramatic flourish that would have made a soap opera director proud. "Marcus, please, you have to listen to me. Julian means nothing. Ethan means nothing. I mean Julian. God, I'm so confused I can't even think straight. Ethan means nothing." She'd started to say Ethan, then corrected to Julian. Which meant there was an Ethan in this story somewhere. Another player in Clara's little romantic carousel that I didn't even know about yet. The hits just kept coming. But before I could process that particular bombshell, Sylvia decided to insert herself into the conversation. "This is ridiculous, Marcus," she said, stepping forward like she was about to physically block my path to my own front door. "You changed the locks on your wife. What kind of man changes the locks on his wife?" A smart one, I thought, but what I said was, the kind of man whose wife asks for a break and then goes on vacation with her ex-boyfriend. That vacation meant nothing. Clara practically shouted, loud enough that I was pretty sure Mrs. Henderson from 1A could hear every word through her thin apartment walls. "It was a family trip that Julian happened to be invited to. I never meant for you to see those pictures. Never meant for me to see them. There was nothing inappropriate about those pictures, or those pictures were taken out of context. But I never meant for you to see them. Like the problem wasn't her behavior, but my discovery of it. So you were planning to lie to me about it, I said. That's somehow supposed to make this better? I wasn't lying. I didn't want to hurt you with information that didn't matter. Information that didn't matter. She was calling her emotional affair with Julian information that didn't matter. The gaslighting was reaching Olympic-level heights at this point. Look, Sylvia interrupted, clearly sensing that Clara's approach wasn't working. Marcus, we understand you're hurt. We understand you feel betrayed. But Clara came home early from that vacation because she realized she'd made a mistake. She realized she wants to be with you, not Julian. Came home early. There was that phrase again, like it was supposed to be some kind of grand romantic gesture instead of what it actually was. Clara getting dumped and having to retreat to her backup plan. She's willing to do counseling, Sylvia continued, really warming up to her pitch now. She's willing to work on the marriage, to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. Isn't that worth something? Doesn't 4 years of marriage deserve a chance? For years of marriage. They kept throwing that number around like it was some kind of magical talisman that would make me forget everything that had happened. Like time invested was the same thing as love given. Like I owed Clara forgiveness just because we'd managed not to get divorced yet. And if I don't agree to counseling? I asked, genuinely curious about their endgame here. Then you're giving up on us, Clara said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand in a gesture that was probably calculated to look vulnerable and childlike. You're throwing away everything we built together over one mistake. One mistake. She was calling 3 weeks of emotional cheating one mistake. Like she'd accidentally grabbed the wrong coffee order instead of systematically betraying our marriage vows. You know what, Clara? I said, finally starting to move toward my door. You're right about one thing. I am giving up on us. Because there is no us anymore. There's just you trying to manipulate me into taking you back after you got done testing the waters with Julian. That's not what happened, she cried. But her voice had that desperate edge that told me she knew she was losing this battle. Really? I stopped and turned back to face her. Then explained the Ethan comment. Who's Ethan, Clara? The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might actually faint. Sylvia's mouth fell open like a fish gasping for air. Apparently, Ethan wasn't supposed to be part of this conversation. That was nothing, Clara stammered. Just a friend. Someone I met at the resort. A friend she met at the resort. While she was there with Julian. So not only had she been emotionally cheating with her high school boyfriend, but she'd apparently been collecting phone numbers from other guys too. The vacation that was supposed to be about finding herself had turned into some kind of romantic sampling platter. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation, the brazen entitlement, the way they both stood there acting like I was the unreasonable one for not wanting to take back a wife who'd apparently been shopping for my replacement. It was all too much. This is crazy, I said, shaking my head. Both of you standing here acting like I'm the bad guy for not wanting to reconcile with someone who's been auditioning my replacements. Clara, you didn't want a break to figure yourself out. You wanted a break to figure out if you could do better than me. And now that the answer is apparently no, you want me to pretend none of this happened and take you back like nothing's changed. Please, Clara whispered, and for the first time since this whole mess started, she actually looked genuinely broken instead of performatively vulnerable. Please don't do this, Marcus. I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you. I looked at her standing there in my hallway, tears streaming down her face, looking smaller and more pathetic than I'd ever seen her. And I felt nothing. No urge to comfort her, no desire to fix things, no remnant of the love I'd once felt for this woman. Just tired resignation and the overwhelming desire to get into my apartment and away from this circus. No, Clara, I said quietly, pulling out my keys. You loved having me as your backup plan. But I'm not your backup plan anymore. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and closed it behind me, leaving them both standing in the hallway. Through the door, I could hear Clara crying and Sylvia trying to comfort her, their voices fading as they finally admitted defeat and headed back down the stairs. From her doorway across the hall, Mrs. Henderson's voice drifted over. Good riddance to that circus, dear. You deserve so much better. Yeah, I thought, settling onto my couch with a beer. I really do. You'd think that after the stairwell ambush disaster, Clara and Sylvia would have gotten the message that their little manipulation campaign was about as effective as trying to put out a house fire with a squirt gun. But apparently, These two had the kind of persistence usually reserved for telemarketers and door-to-door religious recruiters, because 3 days later, my phone started buzzing with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Not calls this time. They'd figured out I wasn't answering unknown numbers anymore. No, this was a full-scale text message assault from what had to be every burner phone app in the Google Play Store. The messages started trickling in around noon while I was at work, then turned into a steady stream by evening, each one more desperate and accusatory than the last. "Marcus, this is Clara. Please just listen to me for 5 minutes. You're being cruel and vindictive. This isn't who you are. I'm willing to do anything to save our marriage. Anything. Sylvia here. You're breaking my daughter's heart. Is that really what you want? Fine, be stubborn. But we're not giving up on you." And then, around 8 p.m., the message that made me put down my beer and pay attention. "If you don't respond by tomorrow, we're going to have to tell people the truth about what kind of man you really are. Your friends deserve to know how you abandoned your wife in her time of need." Ah, there it was. The threat I'd been waiting for. When emotional manipulation and guilt trips fail, go straight to character assassination. Threaten to poison the well with mutual friends. Make the target so afraid of social consequences that they cave just to avoid the drama. It was actually kind of brilliant, in a sociopathic way. Most people would panic at the thought of their ex and her mother spreading lies about them to everyone they knew. Most people would fold, agree to counseling or reconciliation talks, just to keep the peace and avoid having their reputation dragged through the mud. Unfortunately for Clara and Sylvia, I wasn't most people. I was a guy who'd spent the last month documenting everything like I was preparing for the trial of the century. I walked over to my laptop and opened the folder I'd been building since the day I discovered those Florida vacation photos. Screenshots, saved conversations, email receipts, photos, timestamps, everything organized in neat little subfolders with descriptive labels. I called it my insurance policy, and looking at it now, I felt like a fucking genius for being so thorough. The evidence was beautiful in its completeness. There were the original Instagram photos of Clara and Julian looking like newlyweds on their family vacation, complete with metadata showing when and where they were posted. Screenshots of every text conversation we'd had before she left, proving that her request for space to think contained no mention of spending that time with another man. The courier receipts showing that I'd paid $310 to carefully ship her belongings to her parents' house with full insurance coverage. Hardly the actions of someone trying to abandon his wife. But the crown jewel of my collection was something I'd done on a whim the night Clara called me from that unknown number. I'd recorded the entire conversation using an app on my phone, just in case I needed proof of what was actually said versus what she'd claim was said later. Legal in my state, and absolutely damning in its content. In that recording, you could hear Clara's fake tears, her rehearsed vulnerability, her lies about Julian being just there by coincidence. You could hear her casual mention of Ethan before she caught herself and corrected to Julian, revealing that there were multiple men in her little vacation romance storyline. Most importantly, you could hear her complete lack of genuine remorse. No real apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just manipulation tactics designed to get me back under her control. I'd done the same thing with Sylvia's call, capturing her threats, her attempts at gaslighting, and her stunning admission that the vacation photos showing Clara draped all over Julian were innocent moments that I was twisting into something sinister. Both recordings were backed up in 3 different places because I wasn't taking any chances. Now, with their threat to start a smear campaign hanging in the air like a bad fart, it was time to show my hand. I composed a group text to Clara, Sylvia, and, just for fun, Roberto, Sylvia's husband, who probably had no idea what his wife and daughter were up to. Then I attached a few choice screenshots. Clara sitting in Julian's lap at the family dinner, Clara and Julian walking hand in hand on the beach, and my personal favorite, a close-up of Clara gazing at Julian with the kind of expression usually reserved for wedding photos. The message was short and sweet. "Since you're planning to tell people the truth about me, I thought you should know that I have the actual truth documented and ready to share. This includes photos, text messages, call recordings, and shipping receipts. I've been very thorough. If you want to start a public conversation about who did what to whom, I'm more than happy to participate, but I suspect you'd prefer to keep this private. Your choice." I hit send and sat back to wait. The response was immediate and fucking beautiful. 3 phones all started buzzing at once with what I imagined were frantic calls between the Mendez family members, trying to figure out how their brilliant intimidation strategy had just blown up in their faces. The first reply came from Sylvia, and you could practically feel the panic through the screen. "You recorded our private conversations? That's illegal." "Wrong again, Sylvia." I texted back. "Actually, it's perfectly legal in this state as long as one party consents to the recording." I consented. "Feel free to look it up." Clara's response was more predictable. "Marcus, please, this is getting out of hand. Can't we just talk like adults?" Like adults. The woman who'd spent the last week texting me from burner phones and ambushing me at my apartment wanted to talk like adults. "We did talk like adults," I replied. "Multiple times. You chose lies and manipulation. I chose documentation." The group chat went quiet for about an hour, and I knew they were having an emergency family meeting, trying to figure out their next move. When the messages started again, the tone had changed completely. This time it was Roberto who texted, and his message was short and to the point. "Son, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Nobody wants this to get ugly. Maybe we should all just take a step back." Son. Roberto had always been decent to me, and I'd always suspected he was probably embarrassed by his wife and daughter's dramatics. His message felt genuine, like he was trying to be the adult in the room and defuse the situation before it exploded completely. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. "Roberto, I appreciate that," I texted back. "But there's no misunderstanding here. Clara asked for a break, spent it with her ex-boyfriend, then tried to manipulate me into taking her back when things didn't work out. When I refused, she and Sylvia escalated to threats and ambush tactics. I've simply documented everything. For my own protection." Another long pause. Then, finally, a message from Clara. "Fine. You win. We'll leave you alone. You win." Like this had been some kind of game instead of the destruction of a 4-year marriage. Like I'd been playing strategy instead of just trying to protect myself from their psychological warfare. But that wasn't quite the end of it. Because an hour later, I got one last message from a number I didn't recognize. "You'll regret this. You'll regret throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you. When you're old and alone, remember that you chose pride over love." I stared at that message for a long time, trying to decide if it was worth responding to. In the end, I settled for something simple. I chose self-respect over manipulation. I can live with that. Then I blocked that number too, and every other number they've been texting from. I updated my phone settings to reject calls and texts from unknown numbers entirely. I even changed my home address on all my accounts to a P.O. box, just in case they decided to escalate to more surprise visits. As I sat there in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the peace that comes from finally cutting out toxic people completely, I realized something. I felt more powerful than I had in years. Not because I'd won some imaginary contest, but because I'd finally learned to protect myself with facts instead of just hoping people would be decent. Clara and Sylvia had tried to play games with someone who'd spent his entire adult life being too nice, too accommodating, too willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. They'd expected the same pushover they'd been dealing with for 4 years. Instead, they'd gotten a guy with screenshots, recordings, and a complete paper trail of their bullshit. They'd brought manipulation to a documentation fight, and they'd lost spectacularly. For the first time since this whole mess started, I poured myself a drink and genuinely smiled. Not because I was happy about my marriage ending, but because I was finally free of people who thought lying and manipulation were acceptable relationship tools. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. 10 days. 10 absolutely fucking perfect days of silence after I dropped my evidence bomb on the Mendez family group chat. 10 days of waking up without dreading what fresh manipulation tactics might be waiting in my inbox. 10 days of coming home from work without scanning the hallway for ambush parties. 10 days of actually living my life instead of defending it. I'd started to think maybe, just maybe, they'd finally gotten the message. Maybe seeing their own bullshit documented and ready for public consumption had been enough of a reality check to make them back off permanently. Maybe Clara had finally realized that her emotional manipulation playbook wasn't going to work on someone who'd learned to fight back with facts instead of feelings. I should have known better. When you're dealing with people who think the world revolves around their feelings, logic and evidence are just obstacles to be overcome, not reasons to change course. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by certified mail with all the official pomp and circumstance that's supposed to make you shit your pants before you even open it. The return address was from Morrison, Klein and Associates, some law firm I'd never heard of, printed in that serious-looking font that's designed to make you think you're about to get sued into oblivion. I almost laughed when I saw it sitting in my mailbox. After everything that had happened, the manipulation, the lies, the threats, the ambush tactics, they were actually trying to scare me with legal action. It was like watching a toddler throw a tantrum in the toy store when their parents won't buy them something. Pure entitlement dressed up as righteous indignation. I took the letter upstairs, made myself a proper cup of coffee, the good stuff, not the instant swill I'd been surviving on during the Clara crisis, and settled into my reading chair like I was about to enjoy the morning paper. Because honestly, I was kind of excited to see what fresh nonsense they'd cooked up this time. The letter was everything I'd expected and more. 3 pages of legal letterhead bullshit, written in that pompous lawyer language designed to intimidate people who don't know any better. But strip away all the whereas and heretofore garbage, and the message was pretty simple. Clara was demanding $6,000 in compensation for emotional distress and loss of shared assets. $6,000. I had to read that number 3 times to make sure I wasn't seeing things. $6,000 for emotional distress, like I was the one who'd caused her suffering by having the audacity to not want to reconcile after she'd spent 3 weeks playing house with her ex-boyfriend. The balls on this woman were absolutely astronomical. But the loss of shared assets part was what really made me lose my shit. According to their legal genius, Clara was entitled to compensation for her share of the apartment furniture, electronics, and other household items that she'd been forced to abandon when she left. Forced to abandon. Like I'd held a gun to her head and made her walk out with nothing but an overnight bag, instead of her choosing to pack light for what she thought would be a quick vacation romance before coming back to her safety net husband. The whole thing was so ridiculous I actually started laughing out loud, right there in my living room at 8 in the morning. Shared assets? Clara's name wasn't on the lease. Never had been, because she'd insisted that keeping our finances separate was more independent and modern. She didn't contribute to rent, because her income was too variable and it was easier if I just handled the housing costs. She hadn't paid for any of the furniture because every time I suggested we buy something together, she'd claim she was too broke or saving for art supplies. But now, apparently, 4 years of living in my apartment and using my stuff had magically transformed everything into community property. Now that she needed money, probably because Julian had dumped her ass and she was stuck back at mommy and daddy's house, suddenly everything we'd owned together was half hers. The emotional distress claim was even better. According to the letter, I'd caused Clara severe psychological trauma by abandoning her during a vulnerable period, publicly humiliating her by changing social media status, and callously disposing of her personal belongings without consent. Abandoning her during a vulnerable period. You mean the period when she was posting Instagram photos with her arms around another man? That vulnerable period? Publicly humiliating her by changing my relationship status. Because apparently, updating my Facebook to reflect reality was some kind of vengeful act designed to embarrass her, not just an honest statement of fact. Callously disposing of her personal belongings. The belongings I'd spent 3 days carefully packing, cataloging, and shipping with full insurance to ensure they arrived safely. The belongings that were currently sitting in 12 neatly labeled boxes in her childhood bedroom, probably in better condition than when she'd left them scattered around my spare room. The letter demanded that I contact their office within 10 business days to discuss settlement options or face the possibility of a lawsuit for damages. They even included a helpful breakdown of what $6,000 would cover, $3,000 for emotional distress, $2,500 for her share of household assets, and $500 in administrative fees for having to hire a lawyer to deal with my unreasonable behavior. I sat there reading this masterpiece of legal fiction and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Pure, unadulterated joy. Because whoever Clara had hired to write this threatening letter had just handed me the greatest gift possible. Proof that she was even more delusional than I'd thought, wrapped up in official legal letterhead. I grabbed my phone and called Harold Mitchell, a buddy from college who'd gone to law school and now specialized in family law. Harold was one of those guys who'd always been too smart for his own good. The kind of person who could spot legal bullshit from 3 miles away and took genuine pleasure in demolishing frivolous claims. "Harold, it's Marcus," I said when he answered. "I need a professional opinion on something, and I'm willing to pay for it." "This about Clara?" he asked, because word travels fast in our circle, and everyone knew about the separation by now. "I heard through the grapevine that things got messy. Messier than you know. I just got a lawyer letter demanding $6,000 for emotional distress and shared assets. Think you could take a look at it?" Harold's laugh was exactly what I needed to hear. "Oh, this sounds like fun. Email it over, along with whatever documentation you have about the situation. My hourly rate for friends is $250, and something tells me this won't take long." I scanned the letter and sent it off, along with my entire evidence folder, the Instagram screenshots, the call recordings, the shipping receipts, the whole 9 yards. Harold called me back an hour later, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Marcus, my friend, this is the most entertainingly stupid legal threat I've seen all year," he said. "Whoever wrote this either doesn't know what they're talking about, or they're hoping you don't. There's no basis for any of these claims, and frankly, if they actually tried to file this in court, they'd probably get sanctioned for frivolous litigation. So what do you recommend? Let me draft a response. It'll be polite but firm, and I'll attach copies of all your evidence. The vacation photos, the recordings of her admitting the whole thing was her idea, the receipts showing you paid for careful shipping of her belongings. By the time I'm done, their lawyer will probably recommend Clara find a new hobby that doesn't involve threatening people with meritless lawsuits. How much will it cost me? $250 for the letter, plus $50 in postage and copying fees. $300 total to make this problem disappear permanently. Best money you'll ever spend." I didn't hesitate. "Do it." Harold's response letter was a work of art. 3 pages of polite, professional language that systematically destroyed every claim in Clara's demand letter, while making it clear that any further harassment would result in a countersuit for abuse of process and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He included copies of the vacation photos, transcripts of the recorded phone calls, and documentation showing that Clara had voluntarily left the apartment and made no financial contributions to any of the items she was now claiming as shared assets. The best part was the final paragraph, which politely suggested that Clara's attorney might want to have a serious conversation with his client about the difference between community property law and wishful thinking, and warned that any future frivolous legal actions would result in a claim for attorney's fees under the state's vexatious litigation statute. I approved the letter. Harold sent it off with all the proper legal formatting and certified mail requirements, and then we waited. The silence that followed was deafening. No response from Morrison, Klein & Associates. No follow-up demands or threats. No more mysterious phone numbers texting me about settlement negotiations. Harold called me 2 weeks later with an update that made my entire month. "I heard through the legal community grapevine that Morrison dropped Clara as a client. Apparently, when they saw your evidence package, they realized she'd lied to them about pretty much everything and decided they didn't want their reputation attached to this clusterfuck. What about Clara? Word is she had a complete meltdown when she realized the legal route wasn't going to work. Sylvia's been telling anyone who'll listen that you're a vindictive monster who destroyed her innocent daughter's life. But here's the thing. Mutual friends have been asking to see those vacation photos you mentioned. Turns out, when you actually show people evidence of what really happened, they tend to side with the person telling the truth." That night, I celebrated with the most expensive bottle of wine I could find at the grocery store. Not because I'd won some battle, but because I'd finally learned something invaluable. When you document everything and respond to lies with facts, the truth has a way of speaking for itself. Clara had tried to use the legal system as just another manipulation tool, assuming I'd cave rather than fight back. Instead, she'd given me the opportunity to officially, legally, permanently close the book on our relationship. The best revenge wasn't getting angry or getting even. It was getting thorough, getting prepared, and letting their own bullshit hang them with their own rope. The beautiful thing about small social circles is that news travels fast, and bullshit travels even faster. Within a week of Harold's legal smackdown, the story of Clara's failed lawsuit and spectacular manipulation campaign had made its way through our entire friend group like wildfire through a trailer park. And let me tell you, The court of public opinion was not kind to the woman who tried to play victim after getting caught cheating. It started with Leo at work, who pulled me aside during lunch with this shit-eating grin on his face. "Dude," he said, sliding into the seat across from me in the break room. "I heard the craziest thing from my wife yesterday. She was at book club with Rebecca Martinez, and apparently Rebecca's sister knows someone who works at that law firm Clara hired." I raised an eyebrow but kept eating my sandwich. "Oh yeah. Yeah. And the word is that Clara got dropped as a client faster than a hot potato when they realized she'd been lying about everything. The lawyer apparently told Rebecca's sister's friend that it was the most frivolous case he'd ever been asked to file, and he was embarrassed he'd even sent that demand letter before seeing your evidence." Leo leaned forward like he was sharing state secrets. "But here's the best part. Clara's been telling everyone who'll listen that you're some kind of monster who destroyed her life for no reason. Problem is, people have been asking to see proof, and when they do," he made a chef's kiss gesture, "those vacation photos speak for themselves, brother. Hard to play victim when there's photographic evidence of you cuddled up with your ex-boyfriend." The domino effect was swift and merciless. Our mutual friends, people who'd attended our wedding, celebrated our anniversaries, shared countless dinners and game nights, started reaching out to me with messages of support that ranged from apologetic to absolutely savage. From Sarah, Clara's former college roommate. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. I believed her when she said you'd become controlling and vindictive. Then I saw those Florida photos. Girl was straight up cheating and trying to make you the bad guy. I'm so sorry I doubted you." From Mike and Jenny, who'd hosted us for dinner parties for years. "Holy shit, man. Clara called Jenny crying about how cruel you were being, so we were ready to stage an intervention. Then someone showed us the screenshots of her sitting in Julian's lap. What the actual fuck was she thinking? You dodged a bullet, brother." From Andre, who was blunter than the rest. "I told you something was off about that whole finding herself bullshit. Nobody needs 3 weeks in Florida to figure out they want to be married. She was test driving the ex and keeping you as backup. I'm proud of you for not falling for it." But the real tea came from Naomi's boyfriend, Derek, who apparently had loose lips after a few beers at a bar where some of our friends happened to be drinking. Derek, who'd been staying at Naomi's apartment and had front row seats to the Mendez family drama, spilled everything. According to Derek's drunken confession, Clara had moved back into her childhood bedroom and was surrounded by the 12 boxes of belongings I'd so carefully shipped. Apparently, seeing her entire adult life reduced to labeled containers had triggered some kind of existential crisis, and she'd been having daily meltdowns about how I'd ruined her life. "She keeps saying Marcus destroyed everything," Derek had told the bar crowd. "But wasn't she the one who went on vacation with her ex? I mean, I was there when she got back from Florida. She was talking about how confusing her feelings were and how she needed more time to figure things out. Then Julian stopped calling, and suddenly she was ready to work on the marriage. The math isn't hard, you know." The best part of Derek's alcohol-fueled testimony was his description of Sylvia's reaction to their legal strategy falling apart. Apparently, when the law firm dropped Clara as a client and sent their own letter explaining why the case was meritless, Sylvia had gone full Karen mode, demanding to speak to the managing partner and threatening to leave bad Yelp reviews if they didn't take her daughter's case seriously. Sylvia was ranting about how Marcus had manipulated the legal system, Derek had said. But he just showed them photos that Sylvia herself had posted on Instagram. How is that manipulation? That's just evidence. The social media aspect was particularly devastating for Clara. In the age of screenshots and receipts, her attempts to control the narrative had backfired spectacularly. Every time she posted something about healing from betrayal or learning to trust again, someone would comment asking about those Florida vacation photos. Every inspirational quote about moving forward got replies from people pointing out that she was the one who'd moved on first, literally to another man's arms. Meanwhile, I was thriving. Not in that petty, "look how great my life is without you" way that divorced people sometimes do on social media, but in a genuine, organic way that felt fucking amazing. I was back at the gym regularly, had started cooking elaborate meals just because I could, and was actually sleeping through the night for the first time in months. Andre had set me up on a blind date with his cousin Melissa, a graphic designer who was smart, funny, and, most importantly, emotionally stable. We'd only been on 2 dates, but already the contrast with Clara was striking. Melissa actually listened when I talked, didn't need constant validation, and seemed genuinely interested in building something together instead of just taking whatever she could get while keeping her options open. It's nice dating an adult, I told Andre after the second date. Someone who says what they mean and means what they say? What a fucking concept. The apartment had been completely transformed too. Without Clara's clutter and emotional chaos taking up space, I'd been able to make it actually feel like home. I'd bought new furniture, stuff I actually liked instead of compromises with Clara's artistic vision. I'd hung up photos that made me happy instead of the moody black and white prints Clara had insisted were more sophisticated. I'd even converted the spare room into a proper home office instead of a storage facility for Clara's abandoned hobbies. For the first time in years, my space felt like mine. The coup de grace came from the most unexpected source, Julian himself. Apparently, the pressure of being associated with Clara's drama had gotten to him, and he'd reached out to Derek, who was apparently everyone's confessor when alcohol was involved, to set the record straight about their Florida reunion. Julian said Clara basically threw herself at him the whole vacation. Derek reported to our friend group during what had become weekly Clara drama update sessions at our regular bar. He thought she was divorced and looking to rekindle something, but when he found out she was just on a break and expected him to wait around while she figured out her marriage, he noped out of there fast. Wait, Sarah interrupted. So Julian dumped her? Oh yeah, Derek said, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. He said he wasn't interested in being someone's side piece while they decided whether they wanted their husband back. He's apparently dating someone else now, some yoga instructor from Miami who doesn't have a secret husband stashed away. The image of Clara getting rejected by both the husband she'd taken for granted and the ex-boyfriend she'd thought would be her upgrade was almost too perfect. She'd gambled everything on having two men compete for her affections and ended up with neither. But perhaps the most satisfying piece of information came from Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor who'd witnessed the stairwell ambush. She'd apparently been keeping tabs on the situation through her network of neighborhood gossips and building management. That girl's mother came by twice more after that scene in the hallway. She told me one morning when we ran into each other at the mailboxes. Building manager told her she was trespassing and would call the police if she came back. Apparently, she was trying to convince him to let her daughter back into the apartment to get her things. Mrs. Henderson chuckled and shook her head. I told him you'd already shipped everything to them weeks ago. Some people just can't accept when they've lost, can they? As I stood there in the lobby of my building, listening to this sweet old lady casually destroy what remained of Clara and Sylvia's credibility, I realized something profound. I wasn't just surviving this divorce. I was absolutely flourishing. Clara had bet everything on my being too weak, too attached, too desperate to call her bluff. She'd counted on my love for her being stronger than my self-respect. She'd bet wrong on every single count. 3 months since Clara walked out asking for space to figure herself out, and honestly, best thing that ever happened to me. I'm sitting at Marcello's, this Italian place Clara always said was too fancy for a Tuesday, waiting for Melissa. My 6th date with someone who actually communicates like an adult instead of speaking in passive-aggressive riddles. Revolutionary concept, right? My phone's been quiet for weeks. No unknown numbers, no surprise visits, no lawyer letters demanding money for shared assets that were never shared. Just peace and the sound of my life moving forward without someone else's chaos. The apartment's completely transformed. Gone are Clara's pretentious black and white photos that made the place look like a funeral home. I've got comfortable furniture now, a kitchen organized how I like it, and a bedroom that doesn't smell like vanilla depression and existential crisis. But the real change is in me. I wake up without that anxiety, not wondering what mood my wife's in. I come home to a space that's exactly how I left it. I eat what I want, sleep when I'm tired, and do things I'd forgotten I enjoyed. Clara thought she was being clever, keeping me as backup while test driving Julian in Florida. She thought I was too weak to call her bluff. Wrong on every count. The best revenge isn't fighting or posting cryptic social media shit. It's living well and letting their own choices destroy whatever narrative they're building. Melissa walks in, spots me, and gives me that genuine smile. No performance, just happiness to see me. I stand up, and for the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is someone showing you who they really are.